So you're probably wondering why I should take my financial advice. You shouldn't. This isn't financial advice, and it is for entertainment purposes only. But more importantly, this is a summary of the advice of people way smarter than I am that I've taken from various weekly podcasts, which I have linked in the description if you want to listen to them in their entirety. Hedge fund manager Eric Townsend at Macro Voices notes that on news of the vaccine, the Pfizer CEO decided to sell half of his Pfizer stock positions. As the election uncertainty begins to close and Joe Biden looks to become the winner, Eric echoes the sentiments of one of his former guests that Donald Trump will likely start a Donald Trump News Network upon exiting the Oval Office. In many ways, this is a position of considerably stronger power than even the office of the president, especially considering the strong base of support Trump has enjoyed entering the election. Oil prices remain depressed. As an upside catalyst, Joe Biden's stance against fracking should have upward pressure on oil prices. However, OPEC has forecasted lower demand for oil moving forward. Eric himself believes in the 1 to 2 year time span we should see a considerable increase in oil prices. He cites the shutting down of much of our oil producing capacity over the course of the coronavirus crisis in concert with the fact that demand should eventually return, regardless of the exact timing of the vaccine. We should eventually return to prior levels of oil consumption, if not more. Eric speculates that we will see $70 or more per barrel of oil by the end of 2021. Lakshman Akuthan, the co-founder of the Economic Cycle Research Institute, was the Macro Voices guest this week. His market paradigm focuses more on economic cycles, such as the business and inflation cycle, and how they interact, rather than the mainstream technique of analyzing the market through the lens of events. Lakshman and his team correctly predicted the recovery from the initial coronavirus crash in March of 2020 with his analysis. The fears of a K-shaped recovery, where higher income households are recovering quite well from the coronavirus recession, while lower income households continue to be impacted, seem to be echoed in the sectors of the market that are recovering as well. Lakshman points to the strength of the goods and manufacturing recovery around the world and the strength of non-residential construction, and he contrasts this with the lagging recovery of the services sector. Both Lakshman and Townsend agree that we should expect to see inflation in the near future. Lakshman cites the inflation cycle and various proprietary indicators his firm uses, which number in the hundreds, and he doesn't go into full detail on those in the podcast because A, they are proprietary, and B, they are numerous and the ways they interact are nuanced. Eric Townsend cites the propagation of modern monetary theory in the realm of economics, as well as the likely continued spending by the federal government and the fact that the Federal Reserve will likely continue to provide liquidity to the market for the foreseeable future. Money printer go brr, as it were. Lakshman sees inflation within the next 2 quarters, whereas Townsend makes a safer estimation that predicts inflation within the next 2 years. Either way, if you're investing and not just playing the options casino, it seems like it would be a decent idea to have some of your portfolio in something like gold ETFs. GLD is one of the largest ETFs and is tradable on Robinhood if that is your cup of tea. Patrick Seresna says that if gold breaks its downside support, we may see some movement towards 1800 in the near future, but as far as long-term outlook, he also agrees that all of the big picture catalysts for gold seem to point to the upside. Of the podcasts that I'm going to cover on the show, Macro Voices is probably my absolute favorite. If you have time for just one financial podcast in your week, I would highly recommend this one. If you listen to this full episode, Lakshman goes into detail about times in the past where his model correctly predicted turns in the economic cycle and broader markets that mainstream events-driven analysis has missed. He also details signals to look out for that would indicate his inflation thesis is wrong. I think a very important signal of competence for an analyst is when they give you concrete things to keep an eye out for that would indicate they're wrong, as this kind of shows that they have engaged in a more thorough level of analysis of their own position. The folks at Motley Fool Money say that there was a boost in the market in response to the promises of the Pfizer vaccine. Some sectors that have benefited from the change to stay-at-home behavior actually experienced a strong dip in response to the news. Peloton, for example, dropped to $100 as we speak right now from a high of $125 just last Friday. Motley Fool Money observed that shares of Lyft are up 20% over the last week, which they remark is really cool for a company that still is not profitable. We have seen a 44% increase in active riders in the last quarter, so it seems people are becoming more comfortable with rideshare services in spite of any lingering pandemic fears. Lyft also plans on launching a food delivery service, which is a pretty revolutionary and original idea that we haven't seen from any rideshare services except for Uber. McDonald's beat expectations. Same-store sales were 4% higher than expected in the US, while international stores seem to not be recovering as strongly, but overall the stock price has remained pretty flat. They also plan to introduce more plant-based products. Beyond Meat is down 20% this week. Their retail sales were up 30%, but for Beyond Meat, their international revenue is down 40%. 5 states had some sort of cannabis legalization on their ballot this election, and all 5 states decided that if the world was going to burn, then it was time to burn down. Motley Fool Money speculates this will provide a boon to the legitimacy of the cannabis industry, as an investment in cannabis is seen as somewhat risky because the federal government still regards cannabis as illegal, and any cannabis company could theoretically see themselves being shut down by the federal government. 5 new states deciding to legalize should help dampen these fears, even if the federal government still considers cannabis illegal. They speculate that if Mitch McConnell remains the majority leader in the Senate, it is unlikely we will see legalization at the federal level in the near future. Resident pothead Emily Flippin says that the future looks bright for the cannabis industry, but there is no need to FOMO into cannabis stocks. Emily states that this is an industry that could take 5 years to really hit its stride and will likely present a compelling investment opportunity at that point, as the positive catalyst for this industry will take a long time to fully play out. Panera Bread is testing rolling out alcohol sales in some locations in Kansas. Cloudflare specializes in edge computing, which involves bringing computing closer to the source of data being computed. Chris, who is the main proponent of the company on the show, couldn't really explain it any more than this, so it does sound kind of like he doesn't really understand it either, and this could just be blatant shilling of a company on the show. This week's NPR's Planet Money details the history of the Trump administration tariffs on China on goods totaling up to $378 billion in value. It details how the president came to have the power to levy and repeal tariffs, and it goes as far back as Roosevelt. It talks about sheep and sugar tariffs, as well as showcasing some pretty entertaining Donald Trump excerpts. It's very interesting, but the biggest investing takeaway is that if and when Joe Biden takes office, he will have the power to repeal any and all of Trump's tariffs that he wants to. Get your yellows and FDs ready. Reddit ticker says Wall Street Bets has an overall bullish bent this week. Some tickers being mentioned a lot are NIO, an electric car company headquartered in China, Alibaba, the Chinese e-commerce company that just recently posted their earnings, and Palantir. Fuck it, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's a big data company founded by Peter Thiel. Wall Street Bets is bullish on all 3 of these this week. Less mentioned but still mentioned are the perennial Wall Street Bets darlings of Tesla, a flamethrower company founded by half-simian supervillain Elon Musk, DraftKings, a sports betting website, and Zoom Communications. Wall Street Bets is bullish on these as well.